Greetings of peace and love, people. My name is Rob Hotep, broadcasting on behalf of the number 13 SignsAstrology.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. On this particular episode, I want to talk about mythology. And this is an important topic because we're going through a transition right now here on this planet. If you're listening to this video, if you're alive, if you're breathing right now on the planet, it just so happens that you happen to be born in what's called a shift. And when I talk about the shift, I'm not talking about the shift of 2012 or the shift of 2013 or any shift based on a year. I'm talking about a shift based on constellations and the alignments that the North Pole makes with certain constellations. You see, every 2,160 years, we go through, or this planet goes into a new age. Like we talk about new ageism and occultism and all of this. And where does this term new age come from? What does it really mean? You see, we're going into a new age, and the age is, according to the Earth, is when the North Pole aligns with various star constellations, which there are 13. So basically, on the spring equinox, during that time, which is around March the 21st, the North Pole aligns with a certain constellation. And over time, because everything is moving and everything is cyclic, the constellation that the North Pole aligns with is going to change. So right now, the North Pole is still aligning with Pisces. And this means that we're in the age of Pisces. However, we're on the last few degrees of Pisces, because when you study these alignments, there's different degrees within each zodiac sign. And it takes approximately 72 years for the Earth to align with a different degree. So every 72 years, we shift in degrees. And we're in the last few degrees. I believe we're in the second to last degree of Pisces right now. So why am I saying this? What does this mean? Well, this represents a change. This represents a shift in consciousness and a shift in awareness. You see, when you study human culture and when you study human history and you look at the art and the architecture and the way the people interacted with each other, you can get an idea as to which constellation that the North Pole's align with, or which age the Earth was in, by looking at the architecture and things like that. I'll give you a prime example. If you look at Kemet, also known as Egypt, some people call it Tamaray, whatever you want to call it. You look at the area and the pyramids and the Giza complex and things of that nature. There's many debates on when this was built. Some people say that it was built 4,000 years ago. We have all of these different arguments. However, I'm into astrology and I'm into studying the ages. And the ancient Egyptians were into astrology, something that a lot of people don't like talking about, but they were into more so like cosmology. Not astrology, giving a person their personal horoscope and things of that nature, but they were into the broader aspect of astrology, which is cosmology. And you can tell that age that they designed everything in was based on the age of Leo, because of the Sphinx. So, and the Sphinx is basically a depiction of Leo. And they were letting you know that we built this in the age of Leo. And if you study the age, every 2,160 years, the Earth goes into a new age. So if the pyramids were built during the age of Leo, this will take us back about 12,000 plus years, maybe 13,000 years ago. So this would make the pyramids approximately 13,000 years ago, which is key, very key, because this proves that the ancient Egyptians that we thought built the pyramids were not responsible for building the actual pyramids. They took claim to the pyramids and they basically updated the pyramids and things of that nature. But the pyramids were built long before the ancient Egyptians that we know about and that we talk about were in existence. See, the pyramids were actually built by the ancient Atlanteans. And that's why the history goes back 13,000 plus years, because 13,000 plus years would take us into the times of Atlantis. So it's very interesting when you study ages and cycles, because you get a good idea as to what humans, how we thought and what mode we were on. And it helps you to measure and keep track of world history, true history. And what's going on now is that we're on the cusp. We're in the age of Pisces, and we're transitioning into the age of Aquarius. And what's happening with that is that a new movement is coming up. You see, everybody is pretty much caught up on this transparency thing right now. The young people, this is what I'm talking about. The young people don't want any bullshit. Just period. They're really tired of hearing bull crap. And that's why I want to talk about mythology, because when you study Pisces and you study bullshit and all of that, all the bullshit of this age is a direct result of the Piscean energy. And Pisces means I believe. It's based on belief. It's based on myth. And that's what I want to talk about today. What is myth versus knowing, which is what the age of Aquarius is all about. And that's what we're transitioning and shifting into. So right now we're on the last degree of Pisces, going into Aquarius. It's going to take some time or whatever for us to shift, but it takes about 72 years for us to go into different degrees. And what's happening is that the world looks like it's going to end. It looks like it's an apocalypse. It looks like the world is just going to hell and it's getting really bad or whatever. And that's normal. When you talk about a shifting of the ages, it's normal to see a change of the guard. It's normal to see, when you talk about the age changing, the culture that was in rulership in one age may not be the culture that rules in the next age. So you ask, like, why did the ancient Egyptians fall and what happened? Well, simply what happened was that the age changed. When the age changed, the energy goes into a different arena, a different facet of society. So what's happening now is that you have this transparency movement, and it's coming from the mythology thing. And this mythology thing has gotten really big over the past 2,000 years, especially with the advent of the Bible and Christianity and things of that nature. And that's what I want to talk about, because we get confused. We need to find out the purpose of myth versus the purpose of facts and real live hardcore data and information. And we need to be able to decipher between the two, because if we don't, and we get caught up on myths and taking things literally, and we get caught up on literalism, this creates delusionism. This can make you delusional. And this is one of the negative effects of Piscean energy, is that it's a mystic, and Pisces is the master of illusions. However, when it's unskillfully channeled and used, Pisces can become very delusional. And that's what's happened to society right now, based upon losing the meanings of different stories and things of that nature. So many people, they get caught up in debates about the Bible and the prophets in the Bible. And many people say, well, did the prophets exist, or was that just like myth, or what's really going on with that? Well, the first thing you want to do is that you want to define myth. What is a myth? And a myth is something that was passed on by word of mouth, through stories, or through just any form of communication. But the bottom line is that a myth was never written down. And when the ancients first got into mythology, it actually goes back to Greece. And it goes back into, and the reason why they were into this or whatever was because they were initiates in the mystery schools that were based in ancient Egypt. And when you went into the mystery schools, you couldn't bring a pen or paper. When you went to the pyramids and the inner chambers to learn up under the school of Thoth or Tahuti, you couldn't bring a pen or paper. You couldn't bring anything. They would recite you the information and pass it on to you from word of mouth. And the reason for this is because it will help you with your memory, so that you can memorize things. Because anytime you get into a mystery school or get initiated into an order, there's always a set of data that you have to remember. And usually you can't take any notes or whatever, so you have to take this with you. So that's where mythology came from. But what happened is that mythology, over time, the meanings were lost, and mythology became theology. And the stories of the different gods and goddesses they started to take these stories literal. So what happened is that they would go to the mystery schools over in Egypt and study and things of that nature. The high up adepts and the high up priests and the high up initiates, they would go into the mystery schools of Egypt. They would study for a period of time, and they would take that information back to their culture. And many times they would change the names of the different deities and change a few things up so that people in their culture could relate to it. For instance, like if I'm from India, I'm not going to really relate to Heru. I'm going to relate to Shiva. But if I'm in Greece, I might relate more so to Zeus. And I'm not going to really relate to Horus or Heru. So that's what happened or whatever. So when you start talking about how different stories in the Bible were played out in different cultures, all of this was a result of the mythology of the initiate going into the mystery schools and passing on the different meanings. And what's happening now is that, and it took time for this to happen, is that people started to take things literal. There was a group of people, actually, this was actually really an agenda. Like, people didn't start taking things literal by osmosis or just because. It was a group of priests, or a smaller group of priests, that wanted power and dominion and control. And they figured, well, the way to get power, dominion, and control is to start a movement where people took the prophets literal. Say, for instance, where people really believed that a man named Jesus walked on water and did certain things, and everything in this Bible literally happened. And it's up to you whether you believe that or not. I'm not really here to talk about that. What I'm here to talk about is that how this came about. So this was like a literal movement as far as getting people to take things literal to gain power and control over the people and turn them into sheep. And this is what has successfully happened. Now to a point where you have a group of people that if you try to tell them that, look, this is mythology, this is what it really is talking about, and this is where the story really comes from, you try to really break it down and trace it back, they'll argue with you. They'll debate you. They may even want to put you on a stake, because people are, remember when I first talked about this, I said that mythology and the illusions can turn into delusion, can make one delusional. And people are very delusional now. Mythology has turned into a form of a drug, and people are getting high off of it, and it's deluding the mind and confusing the mind. But there's a new generation coming up, and some people call them conspiracy theorists, you know, like New Agers, nuts, or whatever you want to call it, but I call it the transparency movement. This new generation, most of them are indigos and crystals, actually came back and incarnated here in the age of a Pisces, and they were really already from the age of Aquarius. And what happened was that they incarnated back here in the age of Pisces to help us to make the shift into transparency, into knowing. So society right now is confused, because mythology is deep. It doesn't even stop with the Bible and the Quran and things like that, because I'm not here to just talk about and beat up on religion, but even in the media now, they use mythology. When you talk about these crisis actors, and a lot of these stories that you see on the news, and it's up to you. You can believe it or whatever if you want to, but you have no proof. Like, I mean, you really can't prove a lot of these stories on the news that they actually happen. But what happens is that when you start to research it, you'll find out that these crisis actors are playing out certain things that may happen around the world and things of that nature. They're playing these things out and adding to certain aspects of it, taking away from certain aspects of the story, and creating a new story, essentially. And the media does it for money. They're paid, you know, a lot of times the media are paid by third-party agencies to report certain things and to not to report certain things. They also do this for legal reasons as well, because sometimes when a story happens, like say for instance, if a person is shot, like if little Pookie is shot down the street or whatever, the little Pookie might not really want, his mother or whatever may not want him to be, you know, like may not want him to be on the news and his face to be everywhere and to be known for what happened. So what the news will do is, for a legal reason, is that they'll create and hire a crisis actor to play out the situation that just happened. And that's cool, and that's what's going on right now, but it's dumbed down really human society. And it has human society in a state to where they take everything literal. It has human society in a state to where humans are becoming more like machines and just programmable. and they don't question things. And that's the problem. So saying all that to say that when you really get into studying the Bible, or you really get into studying the metaphysical knowledge, it's important that you understand and draw the line between the mythology aspect and then the actual lesson in it. When the prophets and the messengers and the different people went over into the mystery schools and they went into Egypt, they didn't teach them these stories for just for entertainment. Like when you read about the story of Heru and Set and Osiris, this is not just for entertainment. This was a play and a drama that plays out in families, that plays out in your mind. So it had what we would call a holistic meaning. It was multi or quantum meaning, because it had multiple levels to it, these different stories. So the Egyptians, they believed that to teach a people, you teach them through a story. And then once you go through the story and you pass on the story, then you break down what this actually means in real life. So, for instance, the story of Heru, Set, and Osiris, and then the sun is really going into studying human nature, and human emotions, and jealousy, and envy, and things of that nature. That was the lesson in the story of Horus. Many people may not know, well, what's the story of Horus, Ramhotep? What exactly is it? Well, I'll just briefly talk about it. I mean, the story of Horus and his father Osiris. His father Osiris was murdered by Set for different reasons. I mean, you know, like it's different accounts, of course, in the story, but he was essentially murdered by Set. And Horus's mother, Aset, went to her grandfather, Ra, to get the secrets so that she could begin to resurrect Osiris and put him back on the throne as the king. And then in that, she passed on all of basically the kingdom and everything. She passed that on to Heru, the little Heru or whatever. But when you really research the story and get into it, you'll get into the components of it. You're going to see that there's murder involved in the story. There's jealousy involved in the story. There's a love relationship involved in the story. And then you go into the Bible and different stories in the Bible, you'll see similarities. You'll see the story of Cain and Abel. Very similar. It's the same story or whatever. So the story of Mary and Jesus, very similar. So what happens is that the stories teach principles and meanings. But we have a group of people that are so literal now that they get more caught up on whether or not these people existed and worshiping Jesus or worshiping different prophets and different messengers and worshiping and doing all of that. But what about the actual meaning in the story? And this is why society has melted down. Society has melted down because now people are caught up on the myth versus the actual fact of knowing. So we have to get more into the esoteric aspect is what I'm basically saying here. In the mystery schools, you had the exoteric followers, and those were the people that just believed on face value. And you had those followers at all times, and they kept the esoteric aspect a secret, and that was for the elite and for a select few. You have to prove yourself if you want to get initiated into the esoteric aspect. But there was always an esoteric aspect. When you study the esoteric aspect, the reason why the powers that be don't really want you to study it is because it rids you of all the bullshit and all the false beliefs and the mythos and, you know, just all of the delusions that you may be suffering from. You start to study the esoteric, you'll see I'm not like if you're a Christian, for instance, you start to study the esoteric aspect of Christianity, you'll start to see that you're not as different from the Muslim as you thought you were. Or if you're a Muslim, you'll see that you're not as different from the Jew as you thought you were, because it's the understanding of the esoteric. So what's happening is that you have a group of young people, most of them are young, and it's called the transparency movement. They're tired of being lied to by politicians, by bishops, by imams, preachers, rabbis, all of them. They're tired of being lied to. And it's not that they're really lying to you. They may be confused themselves because they don't understand the esoteric. They only understand the exoteric. Or if they do understand, they don't want you to know because they don't want to lose power and control. Because if you start to learn and know that it's not really a difference between a Christian and a Buddhist, or it may be a slight difference, but there's similarity. There's many more similarities than there are differences. You may go to the Buddhist temple and you may start to learn. You may start to put all these different pieces of the puzzle together and you get a bigger picture. So they want you to be one-track minded. They want to put you in a box, because this is how the Dark Lords and those people in power a lot of times stay in rulership. They stay in rulership with the lack of knowledge. But what's happening is that as we shift and go closer into this age of Aquarius, which is what we're going into now, you're going to see more of those type of people. They're going to start losing a lot of battles. See, the people that's trying to hide the secrets, the people that's trying to suppress the truth, the people that want people to still believe in literalism. And it's not even really about the truth, because I hate saying like the truth. That sounds so religious. It's really about separating the myths from reality and literalism from esotericism. And the people that are in power, a lot of it in any seat of power, the reason why they're there is because of the lack of knowledge of the people. So the more the people know, the less they would need government and things of that nature. But government and society and things like that keep the people dumbed down. And I'm talking about the people within the government keep the people dumbed down so that they can keep their position and their seat of authority. But there's a new movement coming up, and I suggest that, you know, the public officials, preachers and rabbis, you begin to really think about this, and you begin to make this shift into this new movement that's coming up. Because this new movement is going to be a movement of teaching the people the truth and freeing the minds. Because it has to happen. We cannot change the problems on this planet as long as we keep staying in the past. And that's what happened. That's why the Pisces shift to Aquarius is going to be hard to make, because Pisces likes to think about the past a lot. There is a karmic sign. And what that means is that it goes back into the past and is always thinking about what just happened. And that's good to analyze things in the past, but it's no good when you talk about making a shift into the age of Aquarius, which is the exact opposite. It's the twin of Pisces, but it's the opposite. Twins are, a lot of times, they're opposite from each other. And Aquarius is all about knowing and thinking and being independent. Aquarius doesn't bow to a king. So the more we go into the age of Aquarius, the less people are going to want to like really submit to government and submit to positions and seats of authority. Now, I'm not telling people to be radical and be Indians, but a lot of times chaos has to come before order comes. So I don't know what's going to happen with this thing, but one thing I can say is that people need to definitely become more transparent. You need to definitely open up your third eye if you want to make this shift and be able to see into the inner aspects of things and get pulled into the inner circle of things. You need to know and begin to study the different prophets of the Bible and the different prophets of the Quran and different prophets and messengers and different scriptures, and begin to trace the stories back to see where they came from and begin to make the connections and connect the dots. Because once you do that, reality is going to become very different for you. It's going to become very different. You're not going to be locked in and stuck. People feel stuck. This is why people kill themselves, and we have all these suicides going on and stuff, because people feel trapped. And the reason why they feel trapped is because of the way you think, the myths and the delusions. Like I said, it's a drug. If you want to free yourself from it, you have to detox. Got to wake up. So that's going to do it for me. I hope you learned something in this particular episode. And until we meet again, I'll leave you in Hotep.